I think the Irish government has adopted an attitude of all migration is good.
This is not about saving people from persecution or war. These are economic migrants. They're coming in here to make money and get as much free stuff as possible.
From my own experience of court reporting, it would seem to me that people of a migrant background do seem to be somewhat overrepresented in certain crimes.
By bringing in mass waves of migration into these countries from outside of Europe, we will over time destroy the idea of national individualism.
We're run by a class of people and an establishment class whose only concern is for themselves. They're not concerned about the welfare of this state. They actually despise this country.
Are European countries in the process of replacing their population as a result of mass immigration? The question is controversial in Western Europe. Countries such as the United Kingdom, France, and Germany have become destinations for tens of millions of migrants over the past decades, often people originating from the Middle East and Africa. This development has taken time to reach where it is today. But one Western European country has long stood out when it comes to immigration, and has remained largely homogeneous until today. Ireland's population stood at just under 4 million in 2003. Only 20 years later, it had grown to 5.3 million. The increase was almost entirely caused by immigration and is nearly twice as large as the population increase of Sweden during the same period, a country infamous for its migration-derived problems.
But the long-term effects of this, people are starting to ask, well, what kind of country do you want our children to grow up in?
From the late 2010s until today, Ireland began transforming into a multicultural society, a relatively late development compared to other Western European countries, but one that has proceeded at record speed.
I think the Irish government has adopted an attitude of all migration is good.
Declining birth rates means that the native Irish population has been more or less stagnant since about the 1990s. That's why the consequences of recent large-scale immigration are clearly noticeable in cities like Dublin, where crime and insecurity have become growing problems. Unrest resulting from migrant crime has at times taken extreme forms, such as in November 2023 when Dublin was shaken by anti-immigration riots, a reaction to the stabbing of several children and a woman outside a preschool in the city carried out by an Algerian immigrant.
You don't hear anybody speaking English now. You don't see anybody that's a born native of this country, who's for generations have lived here. There's been a total change, and it's mostly I-pass applicants or Roma gypsies in this part of the world. And there's been an over-concentration in this area, in the northeast inner city, of low-level welfare spongers who come in through the I-pass system.
Asylum centres are being opened all over the country to house people who, according to the independent local Dublin politician Malachy Steenson, are often not fleeing war but are economic migrants.
The government has admitted that over 90% of the applicants are false and are fake asylum seekers, scammers in other words, looking for a better life here. Most of them will never work. Most of them will live on the welfare. Because in Ireland, if you fail in your application for asylum, it doesn't mean you get thrown out. It means you go and you appeal to an asylum tribunal. And then you go to the High Court, and all of this is funded by NGOs with taxpayers' money.
So, Philip, you took us out specifically here. What are we looking at currently?
Well, this is a former office building that has been taken over by the Department of Justice and Equity and Integration, and it's being used now as an I-pass centre. We suspect there's at least 200 men in that building.
Only men, just men, no women?
Only men, no women or children.
Philip Dwyer is a citizen journalist who covers, among other things, asylum migration to Ireland. He explains that newly arrived migrants are placed in so-called migrant hotels by the authorities without the consent or knowledge of the local population.
This is just an example of, you know, where they're prepared to put them. They'll put them anywhere. They'll put them in an industrial unit, they'll put them in an office block, they'll put them in a field in tents. It seems to be fanatical that they want to get as many people in as possible, and especially now at the moment, military-age men, you know. And we're just trying to show people that this is not about saving people from persecution or war. These are economic migrants. They're coming in here to make money and get as much free stuff as possible.
Ireland has a history of demographic upheaval. In the 19th century, its population was halved from 8 million due to famine and emigration, primarily to the United States. Before that, the Irish had also experienced colonial settling imposed by their English overlords. The Crown displaced Irish clans from their homelands and allowed English and Scottish settlers to move in through so-called plantations. The resistant Catholic Irish were meant to be made wary that it was the Protestant English who ruled over them.
It feels like, I suppose they use the term ethnic cleansing. You know, it is by stealth they're doing this, you know, and it's, of course, we know it's been engineered, you know.
The legacy of this population policy and the historical suffering of the Irish under the British Empire has left scars on the Irish national psyche that remain to this day. Those critical of the growing number of foreigners in Ireland feel that the ongoing mass immigration is reminiscent of history.
You are Irish. I assume you're proud to be Irish.
Yeah.
What does it do to you personally, emotionally, to see that your country is being taken away from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, as I said to you earlier, walk outside the door, you don't hear the English language being spoken, never mind the Irish language being spoken. And it's demoralising. You walk out your door and you don't feel like you're in your own country. You feel like you're in a foreign country. And it's not right. That shouldn't have to happen to any nationality, any country in the world where suddenly a population comes in really quickly and you become a minority.
But what's like the agenda behind it? Like, what is there some personal gain that they get out of it?
Well, I would always kind of say and make the point that this is kind of something that happens to societies when we allow corporations and international finance capital to get out of control. This is kind of what it's not necessarily a specific thing, it's an organic thing. These companies with your social governance policies and stuff like that coming into companies, and they've just become so powerful. They have so much control over the political system, the politicians and everything else. And this is a consequence, I think, of what we're suffering now in society today, like, you know.
Robert Long is the leader of the Irish Freedom Party, a party critical of immigration that received just under 30,000 votes in the 2024 European Parliament election. This is about as large as nationalist parties get in Ireland currently.
The European Union. Tell me more. Why do you think that they are the engineers behind it?
Well, to give a very quick backstory, we had a very powerful political figure in Ireland. His name was Peter Sutherland. A lot of people might know him. He died a few years ago. But he was really at the forefront of Irish politics for many years. He was a Fine Gael politician. He was Attorney General. He was later European Commissioner. He worked with Goldman Sachs, various other international institutions. He finished up as on the UN High Commission for Migration. And he famously gave a speech in 2012. This was at the very beginning of the Arab Spring, just before the migrant crisis really began. And he famously said that this is actually an opportunity that the European Union is going to seize upon. And he said, we're going to use this mass migration wave to dilute what he called national homogeneity, which is to say national identity. And in his reckoning, and the people he represents, their reckoning was that by bringing in mass waves of migration into these countries from outside of Europe, we will over time destroy the idea of national individualism.
Instead of the British Crown, it is now the European Union that threatens the Irish people's right to their own country, according to Malachy Steenson.
We're run by a class of people, and an establishment class, whose only concern is for themselves. They're not concerned about the welfare of this state. They actually despise this country and they hate it. These are the people who would have in 1916 spat on the Irish volunteers who achieved the republic that we had, that lived from 1916 to 1922. They were the same people who would have been happy with home rule. And almost as soon as we got out of the British Empire, even in this state, leaving aside the fact that the 6 northeastern counties are still controlled and run by the British Crown, they brought us immediately into the European Union in 1972, which was has done far worse damage to this country than 600 years of British oppression.
Just how is the political situation right now? Do you feel there's an actual party that's listening to its people, that wants to make changes?
At the moment in Ireland, we don't have any politicians, any political parties that care about the Irish people. They care about what they're being told to do from Brussels, from the EU, and their puppet masters in there. Nothing else seems to matter. They want to be the best boys in the class. What's happening in Ireland, I believe, is easily reversible. We could reverse it. We just need the people's will to do it. We need to be, as we said earlier, spread more awareness. The last election wasn't a good result for us.
Nationalist movements have gained momentum in Ireland following the rapid developments of recent years. But the country still lacks a major anti-immigration party capable of uniting voters and challenging the established giants Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. This may be due to the fact that the phenomenon of mass immigration has emerged so suddenly only in the last few years.
We've seen, like in 5 years, we've done what a lot of other continental European groups have done in like 20 years, because things like move very quick, but also because we're small, mass immigration also moves very quickly. So in a shorter amount of time, we'll become a minority in our own country, even if things look fine now. 10 years, like we're looking at severely bad numbers as time goes on. And that's what happens when you live in a small country.
Jan McGregor is a candidate for the National Party, another minor nationalist party. According to him, the slow growth of nationalist parties is largely due to Irish media silencing criticism of immigration and covering up its consequences, perhaps more so than in other European countries.
The reason why we have this, I'd say, is because when you look, for example, on the continent, I find that the media is a lot more honest. Like, not much more, but it's more honest. It'll bring people on that have different views. Even if it's to slander them, they'll still bring them on. In Ireland, we have a total firewall around all of this. In Ireland, they will only bring on people that have the same views as the regime, the establishment, and they won't let anything else on. Very rarely, they might let someone who has a soft view against the regime.
Control the position.
Totally. They'll never bring on someone who is truly like anti the regime. And that's the likes of us. And they'll never bring them on, even though we speak at crowds. We've spoken at crowds, thousands of people in Dublin who are supporters of the message, Ireland belongs to the Irish, you know. They put us in to get them out. That was my campaign slogan. And I find that although it's slow, there is a vastly growing momentum and uprising within even politics itself.
At the same time, it is difficult to obtain figures that reveal the problems of immigration, making it hard to spark a public debate on the issue.
The Irish government doesn't actually keep statistics on the ethnicity of people charged and convicted of crimes. So the UK government has recently published their own statistics because they keep them. Obviously, Germany has very detailed crime rates as well. But in Ireland, it's very difficult to pin it down because the government doesn't report it, as I said.
That's according to Fatima Gunning, a journalist at Gript, an Irish alternative media platform that has grown significantly in recent years.
From my own experience of court reporting, it would seem to me that people of a migrant background do seem to be somewhat overrepresented in certain crimes. You know, the UK have these statistics that we don't. When they go to places like the UK, Germany, France, Belgium, they're quite substantially overrepresented when it comes to especially like sexual crimes. So you have to wonder, is there something about Ireland that pacifies these guys? Like when they come here, do they get involved in like the Gaelic Athletics Association and all the angst just leaves their bodies? Is there something magical about Ireland, or are we going to experience the same thing? The people are afraid, I would say. They're afraid of what the government, what they feel the government is concealing from them. And as you said before, you know, when the government doesn't want to address things like migrant crime, then of course people will probably see it everywhere.
Conor McGregor, former featherweight world champion of the UFC, announced in March 2025 that he intends to run for Irish president. McGregor is close to US President Donald Trump, and his visit to the White House on St. Patrick's Day received widespread attention in Ireland. He was already previously known for several statements critical of mass immigration.
Another point that was made in the White House there was just a few weeks ago, St. Patrick's Day, was about small rural towns who are now becoming minority Irish. In fact, many areas of Dublin City Centre are now minority Irish.
The election will take place in November 2025, but there are many obstacles for the patriotic martial arts champion, who says he wants to prevent Ireland from losing its Irish identity.
McGregor just announced that he might run for president here in Ireland.
Yeah.
Do you think he has a good shot of winning and actually helping making Ireland great again?
Well, I actually think that if he manages to get a nomination, that the hard part for Conor is to get a nomination now at this. I personally don't know how he's going to do it. I hope he has something up his sleeve where he will. He needs to get 20 representatives from Parliament to nominate him, and they need to get 4 county councils to nominate him, which the way our Parliament is and our county councils, we have left-wing radicals running these places. So that will be very difficult. If he did manage to get the nomination, I think he has a good chance of being elected. You know, I think a lot of the young guys will come out and vote for him. I think a certain part of the population who haven't voted in the past might come out and vote for him.
At the same time, it is unclear what McGregor could actually do about immigration issues as president, an office that in Ireland does not come with much actual power.
So even if he were to be elected, you wouldn't see much difference. At least the only thing that would happen would be the preservation of status quo, because that office holds no power in Ireland. It's not like France or America.
He's the guy who signs off on legislation, and that's where his power is. He could decide not to sign a part of legislation that was voted in by the Parliament, and it has to be referred then to the Supreme Court or whatever. So that's the kind of power he has. The power that our president would have would be to put this issue on the international stage, you know, and keep pushing for change.
In addition to the rising criminality and sense of powerlessness that comes with seeing one's hometown being transformed by immigration, Ireland is plagued by a housing crisis and inflation. Some have linked soaring housing prices to the sharp population increase caused by immigration. The economic situation has made it nearly impossible for young Irish people to build a real life in their homeland, and many of them are now leaving the country in search of opportunities elsewhere. As the third world moves in, the Irish are moving out.
We know that the age group between 18 to 24, I think it's 75% of the youngsters actually want to leave Ireland.
Yeah.
What about your kids? Do they still see a future in a country where they were raised, where they were born?
Well, I mean, luckily now my 3 sons still live in Ireland, and they're all working here and everything. But I've spoken to people just recently, a man in County Galway, and he's going over to visit his children in Australia. He has 4 children have left his part of County Galway to move to Australia. So in other words, he has to travel to Australia to see his grandkids, you know, and there's families like that all over Ireland. And young people, you know, we have that percentage of 75% because, you know, they don't feel they have a future in this country. They can't afford to rent their own place. They can't afford to leave their parents' houses. They can't afford to buy their own place. The wage gap, the wages are getting lower and lower, and it just feels like they have no future. And then they're bombarded in the media with absolute nonsense about other luxury ideas about, you know, transgenderism and things like that. And it's not really, I don't see it as a place to bring up a family unless we make massive changes in the country.
For young people, such as myself in particular, it basically just lowers the opportunities bar in Ireland right now is just at a dead low. Nobody can afford a house, right? Nobody can get anything. You look at the prices of a typical beer or just food in general, it's skyrocketing. Wages have not gone up. And a lot of young people, a lot of my friends even, they have started to emigrate to the United States, Canada, Australia in particular. And it's just, you're seeing like a complete exodus of young people again in Ireland, just like before during the famine and during our history. They're now exodus and they're leaving Ireland and they're going to these countries while we're inviting the third world.
For centuries, when the British were in power and then after independence even, emigration was sort of a pressure valve for Ireland. Like when things get so bad here and there's a talk of sort of social movements or any sort of political movement, the government would use immigration to kind of shift the problem. So young people would leave and that would alleviate some of the demand for change in the country. And I think that's sort of happening again, where the government are happy to see so many young people leaving because they're not going to kick up a fuss. Personally, I think it's because they do want to demographically change the country. I think they're following a plan set out by much more intelligent people at the European Union level.
The Irish Republic is young, having celebrated its first 100 years in 2019. But what will Ireland look like in another 100 years if immigration is not stopped? The country, once perhaps the most homogeneous in Western Europe, has a unique opportunity to reverse the trend. An opportunity few other nations in similar situations might have.
How would you think is the best solution for Ireland to fix this issue of mass migration?
Well, start deporting people,
Yeah.
refuse people entry.
You know, it's not very difficult to reverse engineer all this. And deportations, massive deportations. There's so many people in this country that have no right to be here.
I know that we will succeed. It'll just take time, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better. That's the truth. It has to get worse before it gets better. A lot of people, like you even said it yourself, a lot of areas around Ireland, around Dublin even, are still homogenous. They're still very Irish. These people don't, out of sight, out of mind. Like, they don't see it, so they don't deal with it. They don't care about it.
Remove ourselves from any legislation, particularly the new EU Migration Pact, which they signed. And, you know, in time, when we replace this government eventually, we will opt out, and we'll opt out of any legislation that isn't for the benefit of the Irish people.